Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Established Run's NBA Injury Report Analysis Show. I'm Drew Dinkmeyer alongside Mike Gallagher. We have a 9-game slate in front of us. Still 9 games, no games canceled for tonight, just for Tuesday and Thursday, as the league has finally stepped in and tried to slow down the outbreak that has been going on with the Chicago Bulls. Apparently, the Chicago Public Health Department chimed in with some concerns to the league, and they have acquiesced. So we will have one fewer game on Tuesday and Thursday this week, but still 9 today. How are you doing, Mike?
Doing good. Yeah, selfishly, I wish it was this big Wednesday, but hey, definitely the NBA doing the right thing. Nice to see they finally budged.
Yeah. All right. So let's start with the questionables on this slate. I think it's mostly a fairly clean slate so far because so many guys have been ruled out already. But in terms of the big questionables that we're waiting on, let's start off with Phoenix, where DeAndre Ayton is questionable. They're without Devin Booker still, although he was getting up shots at shoot around today. He has been ruled out already for tonight. Without Ayton, over the weekend, we saw JaVale McGee go absolutely bonkers in a game. So this is another one where it's a big deal in terms of trying to get it right. It's a later game, as Phoenix games always are. So I doubt we'll have information before lock. It is an hour and a half after every other game on the slate. So the question is, will we get information before that last game locks? But what do you think the chances of Ayton playing tonight are?
I think they're pretty good. And he's been sick for a few days. He's actually shown up to practice the last couple of times, and they just sent him home because he wasn't feeling well. So, I mean, he's showing interest in playing, obviously. So, division game, I think he's got a pretty good shot to play. Mentioned on the last edition that the Suns don't really list guys originally when he was questionable. So not surprised he didn't miss that last game. But yeah, I think he's got a good shot to play. Also worth noting, Jalen Smith is questionable here too. So that could be really, really thinning them out. He's actually played pretty well with Ayton out. So possibly a lot of small ball would have to be mixed up in there.
Yeah, and obviously if Ayton was out and they were, playing JaVale as the pure center, he would still probably be limited to mid-20s, maybe upper 20s on the best case scenario, just because of his history with asthma and limiting playing stints that he can play there. And the opponent going up against the Clippers, I think they're very comfortable playing small. Now, obviously without Paul George, it's a little bit different for the Clippers in terms of playing small, but they're still very comfortable playing that way. So seeing some lineups with like Jay Crowder at center wouldn't be super surprising in that type of scenario. If Ayton was out, we think he's more likely to play than not. We'll see if we get updates in advance of lock tonight. Other big questionables for Denver, Will Barton is once again questionable. He's been on and off the injury report, it seems like, for the last week or two here. Home game against the Wizards. We've seen, without Barton, last game, Devon Reed slid into that starting lineup. They kind of ham and egged it together. Bones Highland got more minutes. Marcus Howard got some minutes. They played really well against the Spurs, blew them out basically in San Antonio to close out a road trip. So a very good win for Denver to go 4-3 on that road trip. What do we think the chances of Will Barton playing tonight are?
Yeah, it's an illness, so don't really know. He's been sick for a little bit.
It's been an illness for a week, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll see if he's feeling better. I feel like he's got a pretty good chance to play, but never know. Like you said, I think you nailed it. They maybe don't need to go with Devon Reed in this matchup, but probably we'll stick with it. They did like Marcus Howard. Malone talked him up. Obviously, Bones had a really good game with the 16 points for him. So, yeah. And then, this is just going to be the Jokic show. Just the Wizards get beat down by bigs all season long. So, and like we saw in the 2 games ago against the Pelicans, Willie Green said, "Oh, we played our stay-home defense," and like he ripped them apart. And the Wizards play a same-home defense. So it's just going to be just Joker after Joker after Joker.
That's what we like to see on this program here.
Yeah.
JaMychal Green doubtful. I think they just slide those minutes basically to Zeke Naji as basically their backup 5 in that spot, which does, if they are without Will Barton, does limit the backup 4 and 3 options that they have, right? Because then you've got Aaron Gordon and you've got Jeff Green to kind of fill all those 3 and 4 minutes. That's where you get in the extra guard minutes that come up from Marcus Howard, Campazzo, Monty Morris, Bones Highland, if Barton is to miss. So just be aware that JaMychal Green injury is sort of important if Barton misses. If Barton does not miss, I don't think it makes a big deal. They just slide Zeke over to the backup center spot, basically. But if Barton does miss, it does start to cascade and make them pretty thin on the guards, which increases the minutes floor for guys like Bones Highland, Campazzo, and Monte Morris.
Yep.
Okay, let's talk about Jaren Jackson as well and Memphis. Similar situation here. Jaren Jackson Jr. is questionable and Steven Adams is doubtful. So the Memphis front court here, having some of those cascading potentially injury effects. They're without Brandon Clark already. So it's now down to Xavier Tillman, Jaren Jackson Jr. possibly, Killian Tilly, Santi Aldama, Kyle Anderson. Like, it starts to get pretty thin in terms of how front courts go. So what do you think the chances we see Jaren Jackson are tonight?
Pretty high. After the game, Taylor Jenkins said they just gave him a game off to get him right. So I'd be pretty surprised if Jaren Jackson does miss this game. I expect him to go. Steven Adams, you mentioned, hurt himself late, and they actually just snuck in a couple of Santi Aldama minutes at the end of that game. So he would probably be in there. Killian Tilly's been great. He's really been talked up like crazy by the coaching staff. So expect those guys to be kind of in similar spots.
And really not the kind of matchup you want to be without Steven Adams. If there's any game during the course of the season to miss Steven Adams, the one against Joel Embiid in Philadelphia is probably not the one that you really want. So, look, this is going to be an interesting situation where they're really thin. I would expect Xavier Tillman to start at the center spot. I don't think they would start Jaren Jackson Jr. on Embiid. I think that would be a really tall task for him to avoid foul trouble in that scenario. So they'll start Xavier Tillman, and however many minutes Xavier Tillman can handle without fouling, I think he will be out there, and he's been a very good permanent producer when he's had those opportunities. But it will be a scratch and claw to get fantasy points for a very cheap play that will probably carry a lot of ownership tonight. So we'll talk about these things more on the DFS show, but just be aware Memphis is very shorthanded. It creates a higher median minutes projection or mean minutes projection for a player like Tillman, and the range of outcomes is probably more on the downside than the upside when you're going up against Joel Embiid.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think Tillman has to start. You can't throw Jaren Jackson to the Wolves like that. So I'm with you.
And I think it'll be interesting to see substitutions and different patterns and how they try to cover this, because, Jaren often is comfortable playing center against other small ball type centers, and that's where he doesn't get into foul trouble or anything like that. Philadelphia has Embiid and then Andre Drummond behind him, two guys who are going to throw their bodies around and potentially instigate foul trouble. So we'll see if Jaren is able to go, what that looks like. But if he is not, it is super, super thin in the front court and pretty much a mess. Kyle Anderson would have to play a lot in that scenario. I think they'd have to reserve basically Tilly and Tillman all those minutes for the five just to try to get through 48 minutes of Embiid and Drummond at the five, which would be really tough to do with those two guys. And then if they didn't, I think Aldama would be next in line as like a emergency five situation. So Jaren Jackson Jr.'s availability is a pretty big key for Memphis tonight. We think he will be in.
Yep.
Some smaller questionables on the slate. Justin Holiday, who's been out for a week or so. We've seen more of an opportunity for Chris Duarte in those situations, and he's put up some big games as a cheap value. If Justin Holiday returns, the question mark is, is there a conditioning issue? What does it look like from a minutes perspective? How does this impact someone like Chris Duarte in terms of the minute ceiling? Because before, when Holiday was active, we saw Duarte get stuck in the mid-20s. What do you think the likelihood of seeing Justin Holiday is tonight?
Well, it's worth noting he got the reconditioning tag, which is usually an indication that they've got a pretty good chance to play. Sometimes you'll see that tag, and then you'll see the protocol tag questionable, they'll miss, and then reconditioning tag, and they play. So I think he's got a good chance. And then he's probably guarding Steph Curry, which is tougher for Curry. I think if Curry, Holiday wasn't playing, it could be really.
Speaking of that, I mean, did you see the Matisse Thybulle interview post game with the Warriors? Okay, and what was the thing that Thybulle said is the most difficult part about guarding Steph Curry?
Conditioning.
So
exactly.
So when you're talking about reconditioning and coming back and being asked to chase Steph all over the court through screens and everything, like that is a really, really tall ask. So would you guess that if Holiday is able to return tonight, we might not see him in the starting lineup, that we might still see?
Man, I don't know. I think they're gonna if he's like even close to 100%, I think they're gonna want to start him. Carlisle really likes his defense, and they're gonna need it here.
The good news for Justin Holiday in that spot is Steph has had the substitutions change where he subs out quicker now in the first quarter. So for Holiday, it might be a straight match with Steph, which we saw Thybulle do, with Doc Rivers do with Thybulle and stuff. And in that case, I could see him straight matching the first 6 minutes of each half, but maybe that longer stint that crosses over the quarter, maybe get subbed out there and the minutes kind of held in check.
Yep. So we'll see. That definitely would bring Duarte down. And yeah, maybe, I mean, it's not a locky place. There's been reconditioning tags where guys don't play, but usually they're in.
Yeah. Okay. Nick Batum, also questionable for the Clippers. I do think this is kind of an important one because we were just talking about with Phoenix, if they were without DeAndre Ayton, they would have to kind of go small. The Clippers are most comfortable in their smaller ball lineups when they've had Nick Batum. They've been less comfortable doing that when they have Nick Batum. And if they were without Batum and Paul George, then the options to do those smaller lineups really start to dwindle because you have to get deep into the wings and the guards. So what do you think the likelihood of us seeing Batum is tonight?
Yeah, I don't know. It's the Clippers. I mean, he hurt himself. They're generally, cautious with him. Doesn't sound serious, but I think there's a legit shot he doesn't play. Hard to project him out. But I mean, the last game they went straight center. To your point too. So that was against a pretty.
That was against a bigger team, but generally this has been the case.
Yep. But they do not having Paul George takes a little bit off because you're giving up a little bit of size on your wings. When you're putting in Luke Kennard and Terrence Mann, so I still think it'll be more likely they go with a more traditional center, just because of the Paul George factor. But it's not the greatest spot. The Suns' defense has been really good since Booker went down. So I didn't spend any time writing up the Clippers in matchups. It just
the thing that's pretty interesting there is just when you think about like if the Suns were forced to go to those super small lineups with like Jay Crowder at center or something like that, Zubac and Hartenstein would just get shredded defensively because there would be way too much space and room for Chris Paul to operate and pick apart matchups and just switch guys on to whoever he wants. Could they punish them enough offensively to make it worthwhile? And I don't know that they could. Because those guys really, they get a lot of their stuff from rolls. And I think that's something that even with a lack of height and width, I think Jay could still defend really well. So I do think this is a spot that if Ayton sat, I don't think Ayton's going to sit. So I don't think this is going to matter too much. But if Ayton sat, I think you could see some small ball lineups just out of absolute necessity, not lineups that they would like to play, but just ones that could potentially, because you look at the lineup there and if they had Morris, if they had Batum, those guys can play the small ball 4-5s. Then you've got Kennard, Mann, Jackson, Bledsoe, Boston. Like these are all the guys that they have that could cover it. But having Batum would certainly be key. Okay, returns to action tonight. We've got Jaylen Brown back finally. Some of the quotes around Jaylen Brown were saying that he was saying he really wanted to return on the road trip. But the training staff really told him to be cautious and kind of take his time. Do you expect to see the vaunted minutes cap on Jaylen Brown tonight? And if so, will they actually follow it?
They got to cap him, man. I'm not nice about this. They brought him back too soon, man. He had that Wednesday ramp up, Atlanta or whatever it was. And then he's supposed to have a week, and they brought him back a game early, and they've been feeling the effects from that mistake since then. So I expect him to have a long, gradual ramp up. Probably starting at 24 minutes, 2, 2, 2, and 2 and 2, kind of like the way that a lot of ways older players get ramped up. So that kind of takes him off the board a little bit. Still think that Jason Tatum could be in a pretty okay spot. Not the worst matchup for him either. Obviously the Bucks front court's tougher, but I think he can kind of go off in this spot.
Do you expect Jaylen to start?
Yes.
Okay.
I think he would start.
So that would slide Schroeder back to the bench role.
Yep.
Schroeder's seen a big downtick in minutes and in usage in games Jaylen Brown has played. The usage might have a little bit more chance to hold if Brown's minutes truly are limited. But the playing time would probably be capped just coming off the bench, where instead of seeing these mid-30s that we've seen, you're probably capped into the upper 20s for Schroeder in those situations.
And it's also worth noting Ami Udoka said he's considering a lineup change, but not yet. He wants to see how this Jaylen Brown return affects things, but that does make it a little dicey on Time Lord. Maybe having a little bit of not having the ceiling that he may have had earlier this season. Yeah,
for sure. Okay, Hornets. We opened talking about the health and safety protocols and the rampage that it's had on the league, specifically with the Chicago Bulls. The Hornets have also dealt with that for a week now, and they're actually starting to get some players out of the health and safety protocols. So today they will get Terry Rozier out. They also have Mason Plumlee and Ish Smith out, but those guys are going through reconditioning with the G League. So Terry Rozier will return. anybody's guess as to whether we're going to see any sort of minutes limitation for Terry Rozier here. But I think the big thing is, even if you have like 28 Terry Rozier minutes, right? You add them in, you're immediately going to scrub out these Vernon Carey Jr. minutes, the Kolboka minutes, the Kai Jones minutes. They will have Nick Richards back tonight as well, so he could fill some of those big minutes. You take away some of the Thor minutes, some of the book night minutes, and you still have room to take away from Hayward, Martin, Bridges, Oubre. So those guys that were playing 40 plus routinely, I think now we were able to project their minutes around 36, 37 type situations. And I think Charlotte will be anxious to get those minutes back to those levels, because I think they know they cannot sustain, especially a guy like Gordon Hayward, which you're showing here on the screen, 40 plus minutes each and every night for these guys. It's just too much.
Yeah, and I mean, other thing too on the top of what you added is look who they played. This is the last game Rozier played, right? You played Gigantic and Capella, Embiid, and then the Kings when you just didn't have anybody at all in that game. So like things are going to probably change with the way the rotation's been treated. I think PJ Washington is probable. I think he starts, and I think he's capable of playing pretty good minutes. Hopefully he's over his illness. Doesn't sound serious. He only missed one game. So
I'm interested to see if they start. I don't think it changes much whether they start him or not. I think Nick Richards is going to play tonight, just because I think they're going to view it as, we have a healthy body that we feel like okay about how he played. We can take 10 minutes, like go play 10 minutes and ease off Washington, Bridges, all these guys. So I think you're in a spot where, regardless of whether Richards plays or starts or not, I think he's going to be good for like 8 to like 14 minutes. I think that's kind of where we're going to see him. Which, even if as a starter, I'm saying, like, I don't think he has a ceiling to him on minutes. And I think that will just allow these guys like Bridges and Washington and Hayward and Oubre, who've been playing 40 plus consistently, to tone back down to maybe 37, 38, 36, something like that. And so all these guys are priced for playing 40 plus of late. So I don't think you're going to see a lot of great values on the Hornets. Now, if I'm wrong, and let's say Terry Rozier has some sort of conditioning cap and can only play like 24 minutes or something like that, you might see these guys surge back up again. I don't think that'll be the case, because I think they are going to be want to be thoughtful on how much they overexpose these guys minutes wise, but they're getting healthier. They can see the horizon in terms of being able to play more normal rotations.
Yeah, this is probably the closest to apples you're going to get. Basically, you're taking Ish Smith for Rozier.
Yeah.
So as you said, like Richards got in there against Capella, way different. Picnic basically got out of there. Thor probably will get a little bit more, but I mean, still. Miles still got major burn. Still got
to 40 there. But I think that's the ceiling in that spot. I think the 43 that we've seen, that's no longer the ceiling. Yeah. So I think, we've toned their projection down to like 36, suggesting there's a range of like 32 to 40. I think that's what we start to see in these spots. And I wouldn't be surprised as they get healthier, especially when they add LaMelo and different things, if you just see a game where either somebody's rested like late, or a situation where they're like, Gordon Hayward plays 26 minutes on a night, just like to take some of this load off, because it's been a lot for these guys to carry.
Yeah, and then also Cody Martin did come off the bench in this game, which I am expecting as well.
Yeah, and we'll still play a ton.
Yeah,
all the guys who have been playing a ton will still play a ton, just a little bit less than they have played of late. So okay, do you want to touch on Miami?
I think it's worth it, man. So this is tricky, right? Because Eric Spoelstra said that they're going to use the whole roster here, and we saw what they did against the Bulls, who are generally pretty smaller, right? What they threw up against them. So they started Gabe Vincent. Now you're playing the Cavs. The great Gabe Vincent has no chance to start today. Do you think that's fair to say? I feel like he has such a small chance. But like, what are your other options? We'd have Max Strus, who basically is just Duncan Robinson's fill-in. Yeah. And then you have KZ Okpala, who is playing like a 4-5 role. So you're asking him to play a 3 role, which is not his position. And then and then that's it. Like, you're not going to start your Levin, obviously. I don't think they want to start Tyler Hero because they're comfortable with Lowry in the offense. So like, I was thinking that just Max Strus starts, just because I think you'd rather have the spacing. We should get at least a little bit of size to put on Lauri Markkanen.
Well, I think they put Duncan on Lauri.
Okay.
Duncan's big.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
He's like 6'7". Like he's a big dude. So I mean he's as big as all these other guys. So I think they're putting Duncan on Lauri. Whether they start Gabe or Strus or whatnot, I think the argument for Strus would simply be that against the Cavs' interior defense, you don't want a lot of mid-range shots. You don't want a lot of shots at the rim. You want a lot of threes. And I think that would be the argument kind of, in favor of Strus there. But I don't think they need to make giant overhaul changes to the lineup. The one thing that I will note is we saw the first time they played the Cavs, Dwayne Dedmon just could not get off the floor. It was a blowout in Miami, and they basically were like, we cannot let your 7 play against Jared Allen and Evan Mobley. So we saw Dedmon play 31 minutes in the game that they lost by almost 30 points. So I do think Dedmon's minute ceiling, which we saw against Milwaukee, the floor just crater. I think the ceiling is much higher. I think the floor is a little bit higher for someone like Dwayne Dedmon tonight. But this is a tough spot. I mean, this is a game that definitely has some blowout potential on it, because we saw how much that Miami offense struggled last time. And basically they're going to be very 3-point dependent, right? They shot 32% from 3 last time. The Cleveland shot nuclear. I mean, they shot 50% from 3. That's why the game really blew out. But this is going to be a game that I think Miami is going to have a hard time, scoring. They have a 101 implied total tonight, one of the lowest on the slate. So we've been attacking Miami. Certainly Kyle Lowry and Tyler Hero have shown upside. Lowry specifically of late. Lowry got his minutes cut back last game to 28 because of the blowout situation. He's got the upside to get into the high 30s, of course, but I think this is a tough spot for Miami guys to live up to the fantasy value they've been delivering of late.
Yep.
Okay. Any other lineup changes that you anticipate tonight or think could be the result of, players being shorthanded? I see you hovering over the Sacramento-Toronto game.
Yeah.
So I'm here for Chris Boucher takes and whatnot.
Yeah, so I was going to say the Kings went big last time, right, against the Cavs, but I think Alvin Gentry was really talking about, this matchup against the Cavs. So I don't think that Bagley's going to start again. I think they're going to go back to Terrence Davis, especially with the way that the Raptors are going to want to run on them. So I think Terrence
Davis revenge oriented.
Yep, and Terrence Davis revenge. Yep. So that's interesting. And then Nick Nurse actually talked up, oh my God, Chris Boucher after the game. Let me get the quote here. He said that he was, quote, solid for the most part, which is basically saying he got an A+ in Chris Boucher terms. He said he's starting to figure it out.
We are very much grading on a curve when we're saying talked up.
Yeah.
Solid for the most part.
Yeah. That's like getting a 50 on your OChem test, and everyone else got 50s. But he also said he kind of ripped Yuta Watanabe a little bit, which is basically his main competition for minutes. A little bit of Siakam, a little bit of Scotty Barnes as well, because they play some 5. But man, like I was writing matchups, like God, I like Boucher. I'm gonna die today. But I kind of like Boucher today. I think it's a really good matchup. We know the Kings are really vulnerable to offensive glass stuff too. So. Yeah. Famous last words. I like Chris Boucher today.
Yeah, and we saw the Kings rotation last game was a disaster, in part not only because they started Bagley and they changed things based on lineups, but then the second unit brought them back from a huge deficit, and it was like they benched everybody in the third quarter and played a bunch of guys that hadn't gotten in the game, Metu and all these guys that went on a big run. And so you saw Damian Jones minutes spike up, Tristan Thompson got down. Metu and Damian Jones had not played. And then they finished out the last 16 minutes of the game, something like that. So the Kings are going to be a little bit of a mess and difficult to project, certainly. In this matchup, I think makes the differences in the matchup going from Cleveland to Toronto without Precious, without OG. Toronto going to play some of those smaller lineups. You could see a wide variance in the minutes for Sacramento from what we're projecting, just because if they truly commit to going small in this game, which would not surprise me given the matchup, you could see things like the combination of Thompson, Len, and Damian Jones, their minutes instead of adding up to 48, I could see scenarios where their minutes add up to 38 on a given night. And so there's a lot of potential downside, I think, in this matchup, particularly because those Siakam at center lineups, I don't think Sacramento is going to want to be guarding those with Tristan or with Len and I mean, their next option is Bagley. So they could even go to Harrison Barnes at center type things, Harkless, Terrence Davis, Heald, Davion, Fox, and roll through all those guys. You could see their minute spike. So the point being, the Sacramento stuff, I think, is going to be very difficult to pin down and figure out tonight, because I think they've shown a willingness to kind of play everybody and matchup adjust. So I would just be careful. It's something we've been talking about when looking at Sacramento props today. Just all the different ways that they could potentially play.
Yeah, and they played it earlier, and I mean they took away their transition game and in this game earlier this season. It was last month, so Fox kind of shot okay, but real short minutes just was a beatdown. The
Yeah,
Raptors
I mean, and that's
away,
the thing.
so.
The Kings half-court offense, it's not the most organized. It's not the best. They really, De'Aaron Fox really thrives in transition, and we've talked about this a lot. Toronto just completely nullifies all that stuff.
Yep.
So tough spot for Sacramento tonight, and I think a tough spot to project. Andy asks, what's the deal with Bagley minutes? Are the Kings going to trade him? I think they would like to. I think that is why we are seeing lots of Bagley minutes of late. And I think I know Aaron Bruschi, who has covered the Kings for a long time, former Roto World writer as well, who does a lot of great fantasy basketball work as well, was tweeting over the weekend about how, you get sometimes less effort when the team knows that a player is playing not because they deserve the playing time, but because management has told you that this player needs to play. And you've kind of seen that with, Bagley playing a little bit more of late. The results have been mixed for them. So, I think it's more that the Cavs were just way better than the Kings than it was like an effort thing.
Yeah.
But I think Bagley's minutes are probably going to hang around in these teens to low 20s until they are able to resolve the situation through trade.
And it was a back-to-back. I mean, kind of give him a break, I think I think he has a little bit of leash today. But Gentry said pretty clearly, if the level of play drops off, they'll take him out of the rotation again. So I think he kind of gets it here. But if and I don't like this matchup for him. So if he has
I don't like it either. But the point being, with the Kings, I think there's legitimately 12 different guys that could play tonight. So really wide range of outcomes because we can project that many guys, but then if they tighten it up to 8 or 9, somebody's going to pop up. So just be prepared that the Sacramento projections today have a really, really wide range of outcomes on them. Okay. Did any other injury information break while we were recording that we need to tackle?
Not for today. I don't think.
Okay.
I think we hit everything else. So
that'll be it.
A lot of outs. Let me see how many outs do we have today. It's only 69 outs today right now.
Nice.
So,
nice.
Very nice.
We will be back tomorrow, 2:00 Eastern, to do the NBA injury report analysis show. If you are a premium subscriber with us at Established Run, Mike and myself will be back at 5:00 Eastern today to talk you through this 9-game DFS slate. Really appreciate you out there tuning in. Please make sure to like the video and subscribe to our YouTube channel to make sure you get all the notifications to know whenever we're going on the air. But we'll be back tomorrow at 2:00 Eastern to tackle a 1-game shorter slate now, a 3-game slate tomorrow. Best of luck in all the games tonight and enjoy a great night of NBA hoops. We'll see you tomorrow.